Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Glad to see all of you here for our meeting. No, I am not Alan Page. I know we look a lot alike, but he has more hair than I do. But Alan, unfortunately, has had to go over to the clinic to see a doctor. So we'll trust that he's going to be okay, but he needs to be checked out. So he's getting checked out. And so I'm Jim Epps, and I'm your vice president, so I'll be leading the meeting today. Well, we don't have don't clap for this now. We don't have the fire code to read to you. But I'm going to do my best to tell you about it, and it'll be very short. You know that if we have an alarm, you do not get up and scurry away. You just stay right into your seats, and we have the man who will probably tell us exactly what to do. But the main thing is stay in your seat if we have an alarm, and then we'll go from there. Everybody understand that? Now, wasn't that better? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Remind them to turn off their cell phones.
I've just been reminded to remind y'all to turn off your cell phones or either put them on silent, if you will. Mine's on silent right now. Okay, announcements. We have an announcement from Justin. Justin, come on forward.
Just two quick announcements from the chaplain's office. One is that we're going to be doing a book study starting kind of mid-July into August. It's going to be The Wisdom of Maury, Living and Aging Creatively and Joyfully, which seems like a wonderful topic, and we hope everybody here comes and brings a friend also. And as we explore this book. Also, just wanted to remind you, may have seen in Pathways, or it will be coming out in Pathways, saw in the resident memo that came out. I'm going to start having a monthly coffee time for the men at Springmore. It's a social time just to kind of fellowship, get to know each other, talk about whatever might come up. Kind of starting small. It'll be in the Springs in North Village to start with and kind of see how traction goes and how it gets going. But for now, there'll be about 24 spots since it is the Springs, a little bit limited on space. And we'll just gather once a month and see how it goes and grow if we grow and not if we don't. And look forward to seeing all y'all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Does anybody else have an announcement that needs to be made? Okay, good. Okay, then we're going to head right straight into the program. It's my pleasure to introduce someone who needs no introduction because I believe she's done just about everything there is to do at Springmore. I am introducing Peg Bonini, who is the chairman of the Springmore Endowment Committee, and she's going to talk with us today with some help from Brandon on the endowment. So let's welcome Peg.
Thank you so much for coming today. It is just a real pleasure to see so many of you here, and particularly new residents. Before I start, I would like to ask any members of the Endowment Committee who are here to please stand, just so you may be seen and recognized. Bill Baxley is a Board of Directors member, so Bill, please join us. Thank you. I am going to make a disclaimer before I start. All of you know pretty much that I could stand up here and talk about anything at Springmore endlessly. However, when I started to realize the amount of information that I really needed to give to you about the endowment, I decided that the only accurate way was for me to write it down. So you will find that I will be reading most of my speech today, which is very unlikely, and I am not happy to have to do it. However, I want you to have the information. When I was asked this year if I would once again chair the endowment committee, I was delighted to do so, because in my 9 years at Springmore, I have observed that this is a resident committee which truly has a single goal: helping to provide for other residents when needed. The founders of Springmore always desired to make this community a happy place and a place where residents could have a permanent home, whether in the levels of independent living or, when necessary, in the Stewart Health Center with whatever care was needed. And this remains the same today. However, it was soon evident that in order to maintain this commitment, it would be wise to develop a 501c3 investment account whose earnings could be utilized to help support any necessary financial assistance for residents. And so our endowment fund began, and it has continued until this day. Each of you knows that anyone applying to Springmore has to provide detailed financial information, but the reality over the years has shown that a very few residents will need some financial assistance at some point through no fault of their own. In many cases, the resident has simply outlived their resources. The endowment fund is totally managed by its board of directors. This board provides leadership by making all decisions about management, investments, and outlay of the funds. Members of the board of directors are all volunteers who are selected because of their expertise and their interest in Springmore. In addition, any expenses, such as our refreshments today, are all paid by an anonymous donor, so nothing is ever deducted from the fund. At this point, up to 100% of the income each year may be used for needed subsidies. If that amount is not sufficient, our Springmore budget provides the remainder of the subsidies. So, as I am sure you realize, making a tax-free donation to the endowment fund helps to ensure that the income is as substantial as possible. Other donations to the fund, as well as cash or memorial bequests, there could be gifts of stock and bonds, gifts of furniture or household goods, or real property. Oftentimes, these gifts come from businesses, family members, or friends of Springmore. Of course, the major contributions over the years have come from Springmore residents, as you know from the report you receive detailing gifts each month. One other item that I do want to mention to you today is that the endowment plaques by the elevator in North Village are being updated and corrected. That is an extensive process going back to the start of the endowment fund and has taken many months as some omissions and discrepancies have been discovered. I sincerely hope that those of you who have donated and have yet to be recognized properly will see that happen in the next few weeks. I am pleased to share with you that our other annual fundraising events will occur later this year. The indoor yard sale will be September 5th, 6th, and 7th, Bingo will occur on October 31st, and holiday card sales will begin in November. These are all fun-filled events, which have always been very popular. However, our major source of donations is the once-a-year annual campaign, which begins today. Each of you will receive a packet delivered to you either later today or tomorrow. Let me show you a packet and the articles that you will find. There is a letter from me, an announcement of the campaign, a booklet which will give you much of the same history that I have talked about, and then you will find a contribution slip for you to fill out if you choose, and an envelope to put it in. I ask that you consider a donation seriously. We do not make any suggested amounts, as that is up to you. But we are hoping to get 90% participation from residents. I have always seen the endowment fund as neighbor helping neighbor. You never know what lies ahead for you. And thank you for allowing me to talk about this wonderful program. At this point, I'm going to introduce, I don't have to introduce, Brandon Hare, who is going to talk at the request of some residents about the specific way that you apply for assistance if you need it and how that is handled. Brandon?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes. Okay, so like Peg, I could sit up here for hours and talk about a ton of things about Springmore and go on and on. So I made some. Oh yeah, sorry. So make sure I can see this computer. Okay. Yep. All right. So as I was saying, I could stand up here like Peg and talk for a long time about things about Springmore. So I made a PowerPoint with some bullet points. So I'll stay on task and try to accomplish some basic things that will hopefully answer questions y'all may have, and then maybe spark questions that you have afterwards. So I'll get started. Just a couple of facts about the endowment fund. We always ask, a lot of people always ask, well, how many people are on subsidy or are receiving money from the endowment fund? And it usually averages around 8 people. That is about how many we have. We actually have 8 people right now that are being subsidized through the endowment fund. So if you look at if you take all of our residents at Springmore, that's less than 1.4% of all of our residents. So that's pretty amazing, considering we have almost 600 residents. The review committee does a pretty good job of really reviewing those and making sure that we're taking people that we feel that can live here at Springmore for quite a long time. And then, as Peg says, things happen and you outlive your resources. So I thought that was an interesting number to see, just 1.4% of our total residents. I've been here for 8 years now. Last week was my 8-year anniversary, and I have seen anywhere as little as 3 people and as high as 11 people on subsidy. And I've seen those amounts range from $15,000 a month to $30,000 a month. Most of the residents that are receiving subsidy do reside in our health center. That's about at least double, if not 3 times the amount of what you're paying in independent living, so your funds will be depleted much faster, and that's when most people need their subsidy. Our current amount right now, this month, with the 8 that we have, is right at $27,000. So that is what we're subsidizing for 8 people, $27,000 a month. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about how the endowment fund works. When I first came to Springmore, I didn't really understand this either because I was not very educated on endowment funds, and I had a lot of the same questions y'all may have. So I want to talk about an endowment fund and how it differs from other funds. So I took this straight definition, so I would just stay on task with it. But it says endowment funds different from other funds in that the total amount of the gift is invested. Each year, only a portion of the income earned is spent while the remainder is added to the principal for growth. In this respect, an endowment is a perpetual gift. So basically, it's a gift that will always be there, and we can only take the interest from the income earned to pay for the subsidies. So I had a lot of people, and I used to think to myself, God, we got $9.5 million. Why are we continuing to ask for money? So we cannot dip into that. We can't use the principal from an endowment. And that is something that I did not know at first. So remember, when we continue to ask for money, we're only able to use the income earned to pay for those, to pay for subsidies. And as Ms. Pegg said earlier, we, the investment committee, decided about 2 years ago that we will use up to 100% of those earnings to pay. So whatever we get from those earnings from the year, if it's $80,000, we use every bit of it, and then the rest is made up from our budget, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So again, you can't use the principal to pay the subsidies. That's why we're continuing to ask for more money. So we need to continue to grow the fund so the income will eventually cover all the yearly subsidy amounts. I think 1 year, the earning from the endowment fund did pay for all the endowments with all the subsidies, without having to use the reserves from the from the Springmore budget. But only one time has that happened. Again, we talked about how we use up to 100%, and then what's not covered is made up through the Springmore budget. So how it comes from the Springmore budget, it comes from our reserve section. So if you've been on the Management Advisory Committee before, or if you've heard our presentation during the budget, you know we have a reserve, which is like a savings account. And we put money in that reserve every month. And we split it out amongst major buildings. So if we had a water leak in here and the ceiling fell in, it was $100,000. Well, we may get an insurance claim on that. That's a bad example. Let's say it was $50,000. I think ours is $100,000 for property. We would have to spend that money to fix this ceiling. It's an unforeseen expense. The elevators that we've had replaced over in South Village, 2 wash machines down in the laundry room, right about $30,000 for both of those. We had to replace those. So we have a section in our reserves called resident subsidy, and we put money in there each month. So you pay the monthly service fee to Springmore, and part of it goes to pay for y'all's food, part of it goes to pay for the light bill, part of it goes to pay for all these different things, and a small portion of it goes to pay for resident subsidies, which is not covered. So it's per se baked into your monthly service fee. We allocate it out to the different departments. So that's how, when we say the Springmore budget pays for it and the residents pay for it, it's already put into that category. So a lot of people ask, how do you go about applying for a residency? What's the first steps? And I think this is always important. And I've said this before to several people, but to several groups, but hopefully a lot of people will spread this word to people and make sure they know what to do, because coming at the last minute is really difficult. So I always tell family members or residents, they should approach me within about 6 months of their funds being depleted. And I say 6 months because we have a board meeting every quarter. So every 3 months we meet, and the board approves all the subsidies. So I'll get to that in a minute in this presentation. But sometimes it takes 6 months to gather all the information, to work through this stuff. And for instance, we have a board meeting tomorrow. So if somebody would have brought me something last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm not going to have enough time to go through and determine if we can grant you subsidy or not. There's a lot of things we have to do our due diligence on. It's very detailed. It's very methodical. So we say 6 months in advance. A lot of times we'll have families call and say, hey, mom or dad has 18 months to a year. And I say, great, thanks for calling. Set your calendar to call me in 6 months. So I always go over that. Then I will set an in-person meeting. Families in town, most of them will come by. If they're out of town, we'll have a call and we'll kind of go over everything, kind of walk through the process of what we need to do. And what we're always going to ask for 6 months worth of any kind of bank statements, savings accounts, or investment accounts. So we have to have those accounts, and I have to do my due diligence of verifying that your funds are being depleted. That I need to see that it's being spent, how much you have left, and then what you're paying Springmore and other expenses you have going out. So I have to verify that before I even make it to even sending it to the board. So I will verify through those statements that yes, your funds are depleting. And you also, in any kind of real estate or other assets you own, you have to liquidate that as well. So if you're running out of, let's say, money in your investment account or your bank account, but you have a house at Ocean Isle, well, that's going to have to be depleted too. It's not fair for the residents to be on subsidy and then they have, perhaps $1 million house at the beach. And I know that stinks. That really stinks. But that's kind of, it's kind of own form of Medicaid. If you ever went on Medicaid, you have to deplete all your assets before the state will grant you Medicaid. So we've had that happen before. We've had that happen before where we found that people had, and they don't know, they have a house at the beach or something, and so we ask them to put it on the market, and they have to do that. And a lot of times we won't even grant them subsidy because we know that they have a decent amount of money. It's just tied up in real estate. So a lot of times in the past, twice in my 8 years, we've had real estate property. So once they would accumulate a certain amount, and once the asset was sold, they would pay a lump sum back to Springmore of what was accumulated, and then they won't need to be on subsidy usually at that point. But if they deplete that money from what was sold, then they would apply for subsidy, and then that we know that would be granted pretty easy because we went through everything minus that piece of real estate they had. So just be mindful that if you have a second home or real estate, that needs to be depleted as well. So once we have all the bank statements and we verify the money's dwindling down and we know you don't have any real estate, then I will go back to the original application and I will see how much money you had when you first applied to Springmore. So everybody has to be financially approved to come to Springmore, so I'll look at that. I can have the accounting department run me a report of how much you've paid Springmore from day one until today. So I will know exactly you've paid Springmore $650,000. And then I can look at and then I will guesstimate what your monthly expenses are. I will usually aim pretty high for that, and maybe $1,000 a month, maybe $1,500, $2,000, depending on what it is. So we'll estimate that over a certain time frame, and then we'll take what your reoccurring income is with all your investments, and we try to match it up. So what we do is I will work to see all of your reoccurring income and all your assets minus everything you paid to Springmore in monthly expenses, and try to get a pretty close number of the money's pretty much depleted. What happens is sometimes I'll find a discrepancy of like $150,000. And that's when I have to go back to families, and a lot of times that's a very good explanation for that. And it's not precise. What's precise is what you've paid Springmore and then what your recurring income is. Your stocks and investments may have changed over the years. We know that. Your expenses may have changed over the years. But if we have this glaring gap of $100,000 or so, we have to dig deeper. It may have been a surgery you've had to have. Maybe it was I don't know. There's different things that could account for that still may be no fault of your own, but we just need to know about it. Maybe you bought yourself a car every 2 years. I don't know. That's maybe could be excessive to some people, but there's certain things that we have to look at, and then once we decide that discrepancy. And usually if we get it pretty close, like $25, $30, even $40,000, it's not going to be precise. So we can know, yes, I mean, it's out of money. And I tell families and residents, I don't want you to think I'm on a witch hunt or I'm asking you all these personal questions. But in order for me to present a subsidy to our board of directors and for them to confidently vote on it, knowing more than likely that the other residents are going to have to pay a portion of that, I feel like that's only fair to make sure that we uncover every stone and make sure we have all the information. So I tell people that up front, that I'm going to ask a lot of detailed questions, and I'm not trying to catch you in anything. I just have to do my due diligence of that. So once we decide that we're out of money, then I will work with the family to come up with enough subsidy that we feel comfortable presenting to the board. So we'll talk about that and kind of my role in that. So I always say, let me help you. The more you can provide to me, the more I can relate to the board and hopefully get your subsidy approved. A lot of times they're pretty easy. A lot of times they're pretty black and white. Mrs. Jones had X amount of money. She spent this amount of money, and there's just none left. Sometimes it gets complicated if Mr. and Mrs. Jones were married and then Mr. Jones passed away 10 years ago and she didn't get his retirement and she just has his. And then they had, the stock market was bad in the 08 to 011. And, you have to that's why it takes several months sometimes to actually come up with a sound decision. So let me help. So you help me, and I can help present it to the board. And then I'm the liaison between the board of directors and the family members. So I tell family members right up front that I have no say-so in this matter. I'm the spokesperson. I'm the messenger per se. So that's why I say, as much as you can tell me, I can present to our board of directors. And most of the time, they're pretty easy. There are some that are not, but most of the time they go through pretty easily. So after the board of directors approves your subsidy, then I will personally contact the family to let them know that their subsidy has been granted, and then you'll come in, sign a form saying you want to pay this much amount of money, subsidy's going to pay this amount, and we'll get it set up from there. So there's only a handful of people that know anybody's on subsidy, and that is by design. Nobody should know who's on subsidy. We want you to still live the same life that you have, per se. So the only people that really know about anybody that's on subsidy is myself, the two people in the accounting department, and our board of directors. So those are the only people that know, unless you're on the subsidy and you tell somebody. I can't prevent that, but we don't. That is super secretive. That's super. We don't. I'll tell you how many people's on subsidy and how much money we're given, but never do we ever announce names. So these are some miscellaneous things that I've been asked before, things I thought about, which just kind of out in left field that didn't really have a place to put it. So I thought I'd just mention this, and hopefully this will help. So people ask, well, how do you pay? How does the subsidy work? What do I pay? What does subsidy pay? So basically, you pay the difference between the Springmore amount and then what was granted. So a very simple example is, let's say it costs you $7,000 to live here at Springmore, and you only have $3,000 reoccurring income. After you account for all your medical bill, all your medicines you take, your doctors, your insurance, some personal living expenses, that may be $500. Let's say that's $1,000 right there. Then basically you can only pay Springmore $2,000. So you'll be responsible for paying all of the money. We take into consideration personal living expenses, medical bills, and medicine. You're still going to we're going to allow you keep that money to pay for all your expenses. And then you'll pay what's left, and then the endowment fund will make up the rest. So that will be an amount determined once the subsidy's granted, and then you will work with accounting to say, okay, basically, you're going to pay us every month $2,000. So they will set up a new automatic draft for that, but keep a certain amount in your account to pay for your bills, certain that goes to Springmore, endowment makes up the So again, I put in here, I kind of talked about all this already. You're still responsible for that. If you've been on subsidy for a while, people say, well, if I've been on subsidy for a while and you go up on the rates or my insurance increases a lot, what happens? So we will, from time to time, if somebody's been on subsidy for a while, we have to increase those amounts every so often. Yes, we go up every year for how much it costs to live here at Springmore, and we try to put a little bit of buffer in that, knowing that that's going to go up every year, so we won't have to go and adjust it every year. But it gets to a point where we have to do that, and that's just as simple as calling you and saying, hey, or you may come and say, hey, the subsidy, everything's gone up. I need a little bit more of my subsidy. We'll verify that, and we'll obviously know from the rate increases, and then we'll just sign a new form saying we're going to, subsidize you maybe $4,500 versus $4,000. So we'll continue to monitor that from time to time. Lastly, a lot of people ask no fault of your own. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do I know I'm not in no fault of my own? So these are just some basic examples that I just thought I would just kind of throw out there. And it's in the way that we talk about our things we've seen in the past is no giving away large sums of money, assets, or real estate to family for any reason. So I'm not talking about taking, going on vacation with your family or getting them birthday gifts or doing things for them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, giving your house to your daughter and she pays nothing for it, or paying for all of your grandkids to go to college, or I don't know, paying for all your granddaughters to have a wedding. I'm just coming up with stuff that, and if you have the means to do that, some people may have the means to do that, but you have to live within your means just like you do before you come to Springmore. So if you have millions of dollars to do that, some of y'all may, but we just don't want to say, oh, I'm at Springmore, I have this safety net, I'm going to pay for all my family to do all this stuff, and then when I run out, and I'm here, Springmore, take care of it. Well, when I see that big gap of $200,000, and I say, well, where'd the money go? And so I paid for all my grandkids to go to college. Well, that is a fault of your own. So you have to know that up front. So that's an example. Any excessive giving to an organization, so if you give thousands and thousands of dollars to any kind of organization, that would be something that could definitely can be controlled. And then we've never seen this, but this unfortunately is pretty bad, is excessive gambling. If you would, consistently just, excessively gamble and just gamble all your money. Well, that's just the easiest, but kind of a silliest example. But, that could happen, just to say that would be a fault of your own. You don't have to gamble. So those are just some generic things I thought that I would mention and just kind of walk through a casual conversation of how to apply. So I know I talked a lot in the past. I don't know how long I've talked, 10, 15 minutes, but can I answer any questions or anything y'all may not know about, or something I didn't cover that y'all may be curious about? And even myself or Peg or Mr. Baxley, he's on our Springmore Endowment Board of Directors. He's here as well. I'd like to answer whatever I can. Yes, sir.
Brandon, just to be clear, your example of someone who's applying for a subsidy, and you say you discover they've got a beachfront house. If that house is indeed sold, is the care and custody and control of that money then go to you, or is it still the resident's responsibility?
So that's a great question. It would still be the resident's money. Yes, I just have to verify that, yes, it is up for sale. Yes, it is up at fair market value, and that I'll kind of get an update. And then once it's sold, the money will go to you, and then we would obviously ask for you to pay any money that we had to kind of lend you during that time, to lump sum pay us back, and then it's back in your hands. Because the thought is that if you sell a large asset like that, you won't need to be on subsidy, at least for a while. Then you may whittle it down several years from then, and then we'd be on subsidy. But it'd be in your control. That's a great question. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir.
There's a certain percentage of the endowment that is used, right? What is that percentage?
Yes, up to 100%. Is that what you're?
That's the interest, 100% of the interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The interest on the income,
And
yeah.
who makes the decision if the need becomes greater? Can the board make a decision to increase, well, they can't increase 100%, can they?
That's right. I don't. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't. Yeah, that's a good question, and I forgot to touch on this. So that's a good question. So we have an investment committee, which is a subcommittee of the Springmore Endowment Fund, and that's made up of 3 members on the fund, and they're the investment committee, and then we have our endowment fund is invested through Merrill Lynch, and it's a certain section of investors who focus strictly on endowment funds. So we meet with them pretty regularly. We're actually meeting tomorrow before our board meeting to get a report from them, and we walk through all the investments. I always attend that. Mr. Ammons always attends that, and then Mr. Dilday, Kyle Dilday, always attends that as well. So the investment committee makes the decisions of how, we want to maybe have more money in real estate and less in stocks, or we want to invest in this. Our advisors will kind of, give us advice, and then we'll decide. And that's a great question. Up to a couple of years ago, we were only doing 50% of the earnings to go towards subsidy. But as the need grew, that we said, well, we need to do 100%. So yeah, that was decided amongst the investment committee. Suggested that, and then brought it to the board, and then the board voted yes. Let's use up to 100% for the subsidy. Yes, sir, Mr. Knight, you had another question.
Adjacent to the Ammons room downstairs, there's a wall there with all kinds of different plaques about endowment contributions, and it kind of gets confusing trying to figure out what all that's about.
Yes, that's right. Ms. Pegg touched on that a second ago. Yes, all those plaques are supposed to symbolize people that gave money, and the sizes represent a certain amount that was donated. So we're working to redo those plaques. The smallest ones represent $1,000 up to $4,999. So we are out of spaces for those. Obviously, there's some blank ones on there, but we have not updated that board in quite some time, COVID and various other reasons. So we're in the process of going through all of that, and we're going to have to actually buy, and they're created another whole board for us to have even smaller size plaques for all the $1,000 donations, because we have so many of them. And then we will move up the $5,000, $10,000, and $20,000 donations on that board. So perhaps that's something we could get, Peg, and we don't know if we have anything saying, I know not on the board, but saying this size plaque is 5,000 or this is 10,000. Yeah, we can get kind of some legend or key so you can know the amounts if you'd like.
And are those for a one-time contribution or a cumulative?
Yeah, those are cumulative. Yes, sir. Jessica Burke in our business office, she keeps all the donations. She enters them at least once or twice a week for any donations we receive. If somebody passes away, from the campaign coming up, I just writes a random check. If you do it online, and she'll update it. We have an access database, and she'll update that every week. And then when it comes time, she'll print off a report, and we'll see how much. We can tell you at any point in time how much somebody's donated to the endowment fund up to within like a week. Yes, ma'am.
Can one request to be anonymous in regard to plaques?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And that there have been several people that has been anonymous on that, and you most certainly can. You can just not have your name up there at all, or and just stay off that. We've had several people do that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
At what point does a resident say they are in crisis? So that, because you're saying like 6 months, does the person have to be in crisis for 6 months, or do you just look back at I'm just.
Yeah. So, and I hate I've been repeating these questions for the TV. I never do that. So, but I don't present much though. So I forget. But I'll repeat this question because I just thought about it. The question was, when do you know you're in crisis to come to me, and how far do we look back? We'll look all the way back we look 6 months back to your bank statements. But like I say, when you feel like about when you feel like you're going to run out of money in about 6 months, that's kind of the crisis. Yeah. So that's the crisis area. I'd say if you say, God, I think my funds are going to be, I'm not going to be able to pay Springmore their full amount in 6 months. That's the crisis point. And a lot of families, like I said, will reach out to me, or residents. It depends on which one, a month to 18 months before they have before they go into it, just to give me a heads up, and I'll put it on my radar, and I'll kind of go and tell them at that point, okay, well, in 6 months or more, 8 months, but no later than 6 months, this is what I'm going to ask you for. So I'll go ahead and tell them, I'm going to have the bank statements and no real estate and things of that nature, just to kind of go ahead and prep them, and that makes that process a little quicker. Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. Like Mr. Bundy's hand, I couldn't see.
Will residents be asked to move to a smaller apartment, or if they're living in a house, would they be asked to move if they were running out of funds?
Yep. So the question was, would a resident be asked to move to a smaller dwelling or unit if they were requesting and granted a subsidy? There's nothing written saying that you have to move to a smaller unit. Although most people are very conscious about that and do that very much before that they need subsidy. So we have a lot of times people move from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom to a studio because they're wanting to save money on their own. So we've never had, I have not had to approach that in my 8 years in independent living, because we don't grant many independent living subsidies, and those aren't near as much as the health center. And the health center, yes, if you're in a private room paying $10,000 a month, and if you can live in a semi-private room for $7,000 a month, we are going to ask you to move to a semi-private room with that, just, $3,000 a month times 12 months, that's pretty expensive. So we will ask you to move to a semi-private room. Yes, ma'am. It's a great question. And in a lot of places, I've worked my job before this. It was very much stated black and white. You get subsidy. You move to the absolute smallest unit here when it comes available. And, again, we don't have that written anywhere. Most people, we talk about it. And most people have, in my 8 years, have done that already.
Other questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Knight.
Has there been any thought at all to other donations for the endowment fund, as far as people might have extra money left over from their food service at the end of the month, to be able to donate that back at all to the endowment?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So I'll answer the food thing for everybody here in a second. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times people do planned giving. So a lot of people will have Springmore in their will, and a lot of times we don't know about that. But a lot of times someone will pass away, and 3 months later we'll get this very generous check from someone that had Springmore in their will, and we don't know about it. We've had interesting things donated to us in the past. We've had some china and some beautiful silver platters that we have on our books. We at one point, and I don't know is Mr. Calloway here? Yes, is Mr. Calloway? Mr. Calloway, how many cemetery plots do we have at one time? Too many. Our joke was we were dying to give those away. We tried to hustle those things as much as we could. We went to every funeral home, every cemetery, trying to just get anything for those, and those are just not hot commodities, So we have recently, not recently. The last time someone asked if we were still taking burial plots, I said, "Sir, I will be gracious to take anything, but this is kind of where we're at this point, and we hadn't had much success with it." So So no, sir, that would, that's okay. Thank you, But going back to the money part, and that's a long one, and that's been a one thing that's been misconceived for so long, and it is complicated to understand. But remember, your monthly service fee, that's one lump sum payment. And just like, you get a portion of that lump sum goes towards your food, portion of it goes to pay the electricity bill, to pay for the staff. And so remember, that's just your allotted amount of money for your meal. So it's not real money per se, so you can't give it back. But many people have asked that, and man, our endowment would be at least $25 million if we had that, because we've had a lot of people ask that. But anyway, yeah, unfortunately that won't work. These are great questions. Hope I'm answering sufficiently. What do y'all have? Other questions? Well, I'll ask Mr. Bill Baxley if there's anything that you feel like I should perhaps go over, or something that I hadn't mentioned that you feel should be said or spoken, or do you think covered the gist of it, or?
No, I just want to say one thing. That is, Peg's presentation, your presentation today has been fantastic. Yes. I think it's laid out for everybody.
Thank you.
The importance and the meaningfulness of what the endowment plan is doing. And so I really think you've knocked it out of the ballpark. And if there are any other questions, please bring them on. But I can tell you that it would have been nice when I joined to listen to this first. But this is a great presentation. Thank y'all on behalf of the board for the effort y'all put into this.
Thank you, Mr. Baxley. Yeah, I want it to be kind of casual. I can make it as formal as you want it to be, but it is what it is. And, we're kind of a casual group, and it's a very formal topic, but we can make it, casual, because it is a really touchy thing. And I always tell people, and I can't take claim for this, is I heard this from somebody else years ago about an endowment fund where I used to work, but they always ask, I always try to tell the families of the residents, so let me take the burden off your shoulders and put it on mine. Y'all have done all you've done. You've worked your entire life. You've spent a lot of money at Springmore. So now let me take that on and let me help you get this subsidy. And that is a good feeling. It takes a lot of time to go through a lot of these. I won't lie. When I get on, it's a big road ahead of me to go through all this. But it's one of the most rewarding things, probably the most rewarding thing that I can do here at Springmore, is to call a resident or a family member and say, hey, your subsidy's been granted, and just to see their joy, because it's a very humbling thing to do. If you've never had to do it, it's very humbling, and it's very rewarding whenever I can go and tell people that they've been granted subsidy. So I'm going to have Daniel put this up on the portal, if that will be helpful. I know it's just some bullet points, but it may spark other questions. It hopefully will, maybe in conversation at dinner or something, if somebody asks, hey, I saw that the presentation up there on the portal, what did he mean by 6 months? Or, what's no fault of their own? Maybe that would just help. So I'll have him put it up there, and y'all know where I'm at if you have any other questions. And thank y'all for letting me speak to y'all today. I really appreciate it.
Brandon and Peg, boy, y'all, do I have to call her Miss Peg? I heard you call her Miss Peg.
I don't know. I can't call Mr. Knight Mr. Knight. I got to call him Harry. Peg, she just kind of lets me call her whatever. So I think Peg's good.
I've heard some of the names that you've called her, and I think it's better for you to use Miss Peg. Well, that was a wonderful presentation. Wouldn't you say that was a great presentation? And Brandon, I don't know any other speaker that has had the attention of the group any stronger than you had it today.
Oh, wow.
I've fanned myself around and looked at people, and they were really listening to what you and Peg had to say. Okay, thank you. I'm going to thank a couple other people. With the two wonderful young ladies who hand out tickets every month. Please stand up. Oh, they're no longer here? There's one back there. There we go. And also, I want to thank Jim Bundy for being our cameraman. Please give Jim a big hand. Okay. Next month, we will not have a meeting. It's no July meetings, but in August, we will be having a presentation on Rise Against Hunger. And that will be in here on August the 14th. So put that down on your calendar. We'll have reminders for you. But does anybody have anything else they need to say that's worth saying? Okay, well, let's have a raffle. Okay, I'm going to really make these things hop because I told my wife don't expect to win because you're always on the bottom because she's the first one coming. Okay. I can't get you to do it, huh? Would you pull one out? Don't look. You just pull it. Thank you. All right, the number is 26998. Well, congratulations. Who is this? What is your name, ma'am?
Betty Moore.
Eddie Moore, just stay right there. We're going to bring it to you.
Ms. Moore, would you like the blue?
Thank you.
Would you like the blue or the red? Blue or red? The red. Congratulations. Happy early 4th of July.
Okay, the lady just said a great thing. I was going to wait until the end of the season to tell y'all this, but I'm going to see if I can have her come up. The lady who is in charge of the First Citizens Bank does this every month and asks nothing for it. So even though she's not here, give her a hand. I want this wonderful man to pull out the next ticket. Don't pull out yours, man. Okay? I'm going to get away from him so he can possibly win. Okay, the ticket number is 27003. 270. There he goes. Congratulations. Give him a hand. I don't know what this is. It says $100. I haven't seen one of those before. But this is a $100 gift that has been anonymously given to the winner of the next pull. All right, honey, you think you can pull your number out? It'll be great. I'll pat you on the back.
He goes overboard sometimes. It's funny. I really think we did good.
It's my number. No, it's not. Okay, here's the winner. What did I do with the $100? It's in my pocket. Did I put that $100 in my pocket? There it is. Did you steal it from me?
No, it was right up here.
Okay, here's the number for $100. 27002. All right. Your meal that you're having. What can you do? That's Martha Robinson, if you don't know, and she is a wonderful lady. This is exactly who she is. Okay, we've done everything, I believe. Once again, Brandon and Peg, thank you so much. And thank you for your participation and for being here. We hope you enjoyed the refreshments. Did you enjoy the refreshments? Good. Okay. Have a great 2 months, and we'll see you back here.